I'd like to welcome you all to share a little time with us in conversation with Steventhen Holland. And Steventhen is going to join us today to discuss some elements and issues of some things that happened in your own personal life and how it's impacted your ministry. And we thought maybe let's start by talking about when you were about 8 years old. Some things happened in your life that were illuminating and changed your life.
Yeah, Chip, thank you so much for having me today. It's such an honor to be able to share. So 8 years old, I was at school. I had some people look at me and say, "Man, you're weird and different." And I was like, "Okay, what's that mean?" And they said, "Your whole family is a totally different color than you." And I'm 8 years old, and I look at my hand, and they're not lying. I'm brown. Right. My whole family was white, and So something is not right here, right? So that's the first time in my life, Chip, that I remember being broken. Because why am I the wrong color? I'm struggling with that. Why am I weird? Why am I different? An 8-year-old child doesn't like to hear that. An adult doesn't like to hear that. So I go home that day after school, and I sit down on the edge of the bed, getting ready to go to bed. I didn't want to talk about it. But I don't know if you grew up like I did, but I had one of those moms that was all up in your business,
Right.
Later in life, I knew it was because she loved me.
Correct.
But at that time, I just didn't want to talk about it. But she would not let me go to sleep until we had that conversation. And so I told her what happened that day at school, what those boys said, and how much it hurt. And so she even pulls me in really close, her arms around me at this time, and she's looking into my eyes, and I'm like, okay, something's happening here. And she said, "Son, I want to tell you something. I love you. You've always been my son. You always will be my son. But at 7 days old, our family brought you in as a foster child. So I did not give birth to you. So I'm finding out as an 8-year-old child that this isn't really my family. At least that's what I thought initially.
Yeah.
I'm not their blood." What do you mean you didn't give birth to me? So they brought me in, and she paused for a minute, and kind of a cliffhanger there. I'm like, okay. She walks over to my closet. She reaches up into the top of the closet in this box. She pulls out a folder, and in that folder there was 8 pages of typewriter paperwork from 1982. I found out I was born, I knew my birthday, but March 31st, 1982. And I had the name of my birth mom, Glenda Sue Holt, and I had the other 7 pages were broken information of family names. So, grandparents, aunts and uncles, that type of thing.
And so you're 8 years old and you're hearing this for the first time. I mean, it would be tough enough for an adult to process,
Absolutely.
But as an 8-year-old, your emotions were probably way ahead of your actual intellectual thought process of what's going on.
Right. Well, and like you said, I mean, people ask me how did you really feel? I was frustrated. I was angry. One of the big questions I had was, why would a mother not want her son? Mm-hmm. Explain that to me. Initially I felt, this isn't my family. Not really, right?
Right.
Again, wrong color. I'm not their blood son. They didn't give birth to me. So I was struggling with all that. Now, just to say that folder she gave me, at the time, I didn't realize how powerful it was. Actually a gift, an amazing gift, but I didn't know that at the time. Later in the story, maybe that'll come out. But as an 8-year-old, I'm just frustrated and have all kinds of questions. I'm questioning God because, when I get an opportunity to speak a lot, Chip, I say I had a drug problem growing up. I was drug in and drug out at every church service known to man.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? From an early age.
Right.
I had family members.
Well, that's part of the heart of the love that your mom showed you when she sat down on the bed and drew you in.
Yeah,
Absolutely, yeah.
It is. I mean, so that the frustration, the anger, all that stuff was quickly replaced by the love that I had always been shown.
But there's a whole lot more to this story than just you being adopted into this family. And so let's jump into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so again, at 8 years old, I find out that I'm adopted. So that started a journey. So as an 8-year-old, in the midst of that brokenness, I find Christ. I run to an altar at a revival back in 1990, as an 8-year-old child. In the midst of trying to figure out all those questions, I started my faith journey. I said, God, I'm hurting. I have questions. I need answers. And I've known your name for a long time. I've known the name of Jesus, but I didn't have a relationship with him. So I came running to the cross. So from quickly, Jesus became everything. There's a saying out there that Jesus plus nothing equals everything. But I was putting something in that nothing spot for a lot of my life up until that point. But Jesus was my all in all.
It's a mighty mature thing for an 8-year-old.
Absolutely. But brokenness kind of brings us to a place
It
of
does.
where, of needing that. So, for a little bit, Jesus was enough, and he should always be. But, as many of us experience the faith walk, it quickly became some of those emotions as in middle school, high school, dating was always a struggle. I'm in a predominantly white community. I'm a biracial child in the South.
Yeah.
So I love my community, but, it was hard. I mean, there were struggles. It was different. So some of those questions started coming back up. But one thing for me is sports was a place that I was earthquake in 7th grade, 200 none of your business, running fullback, middle linebacker. Once I got to high school, I became freight train. I was 200 and some more none of your business, and fullback, middle linebacker, had scholarship offers. Then I had 17 years old, I had a back injury, and that ended my football playing days. The doctor looked at my family and said, he can play football or he can walk. And luckily my parents loved me enough to say he wants to walk. I wanted to play football,
Yeah, sure. Because you think you're invincible.
Exactly.
Right.
Absolutely. So, middle school, high school, but there was always this longing that something that was missing in my life that I couldn't quite explain. Again, Jesus should be enough. And I knew that he was, but struggling with the day-to-day, and really what it was, I can look back now and say it was those questions of, why would a mother not want her son? Where's she at? Maybe one day could I meet her? And the timing was just never right. And so I go to college, played baseball in college at King College in Bristol, Tennessee. It's now King University, but I met my wife there. She was a volleyball player. We started talking very early about starting a family, what that would look like. We get married in June of 2007. Actually, she's going to be mad at me. I always mess it up. 2006.
Okay.
Sorry, Rachel. But 2006, we get married, and we start trying to have a family early.
Right.
And we had a miscarriage. We lost our 8-week-old baby. Just devastating. I'm a young father to be, young husband. What do you say to your wife, with that loss? Here I am broken again. And at this, I don't know my race. I don't know my ethnicity. I'm questioning, did we lose this baby because of me, my past? We have a successful pregnancy soon thereafter. And then our third pregnancy, we lose another baby at 10 weeks old. This one, my wife had to go in the hospital. And it was traumatic for me on another level because she had to go behind closed doors, which a lot of the world maybe is experiencing now with having to take loved ones and not being able to see them.
Sure.
And so I'm struggling with that. So we've had 2 miscarriages, and through that process of losing those babies, God really broke my heart. But the devil was working too. He's lurking, and he was saying, this is your fault. And as a husband, as a father, is it because of my past and things that have happened, family history that I know nothing about, that we're losing our babies? And it broke me.
Right.
And I'm processing that. But in the midst of that pain, God, we're actually on our 4th pregnancy. Eliana, Isabella's our oldest. Eliana's our middle. And he said, it's time to look for your mom. So if you remember back to that 8-year-old.
Yes.
Pulling that folder out of the top of that closet.
Yes.
And I said it was a gift that I didn't realize that I had received, a major gift. So I dig that folder out. I'm 27 years old. I'm youth pastoring at the time. I was working on a sermon in Tampa, Florida, and the Spirit of the Lord just said, it's time. That's all I got.
Right.
But I knew what he was saying, but I processed for a few days. Get this folder out. I open it up. And again, there's 8 pages of typewriter paperwork. So I take that and I say, okay, where do I start? Google sounded like a good idea, right?
Sure.
There's some good stuff on Google.
Right.
So I start name searching. So 3 days, when God says it's time, look out.
Right.
He's in the business of perfect timing. And 3 days on Google, on the third day, I came across a website for a man named Steve Holt. And my mother's maiden name, or her birth name was Holt, last name. So I said, okay. And he's a magician and ventriloquist from Spartanburg, South Carolina. And then I'm like, this is weird. Why would a magician and ventriloquist come up on my search? And this guy is he's weird, right? He's talking with dummies and cutting people in half,
Right.
And I get on his website and I'm about to get off of it. Like, why is it here? And then I look at his bio and I'm reading his family history, and every single name that's listed in his bio matches every single name on that paperwork from 1982. But one name specific, he calls his baby sister, was Glenda Sue Holt. And that's my birth mom. So at 27 years old, I actually track my birth uncle down. I'm in Tampa, Florida. I jump on a plane and fly to Spartanburg, South Carolina. And you talk about two...
Does he know you're coming?
He does.
Okay.
I call, I sent him an email, actually, and this is what I said in the email. I could be your long-lost nephew. Send. I mean,
right.
Like, what else do you say?
Yeah, exactly. And what was his response?
Well, his wife said that he read the email and literally she had to pick him up off the floor.
I bet.
So because the last time that he ever, and I found this out, I flew up to meet him.
Yeah.
And we embraced and we hugged as, normally would be awkward for me, but in that moment it was just beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'm 27-year-old man meeting my birth uncle, Steve Holt, for the first time.
Right.
And he said, the last time that I really truly thought about you, you were in the womb. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, my baby sister, your birth mom, Glenda Sue Holt, she was 18. She was mentally challenged. And he actually said that there's 6 of us. I'm the only one out of 6 that doesn't have some form of mental handicap. So our entire family has had a, mental handicap our whole life. And he said, you have 2 uncles, and you actually have 2 aunts as well. And he said, but your mom, 18, living in a mental institution, they had her set up with a work program so she could walk from the mental facility to her job.
Right.
One evening she was coming home and she was actually raped by 5 men. Nobody knew it. She came back to the facility, and a few months later, they realized that she was pregnant, and they asked her what happened. So she, in her way, because she's actually only 11-year-old mental capacity.
Right.
So an 18-year-old, in the mind of a child.
Sure.
So you can imagine what she's trying to communicate to them. But when they realized that she was pregnant, so she's in a state mental hospital. Let's play this out. She has no family.
Yep.
She has no means to provide. And you can imagine what that state facility is saying, because as a pregnant woman, you only have 3 options. You can parent, which they're saying that there's no way you can do that. You can choose adoption, which, okay, or abortion.
Right.
And they were pressuring her to abort because there's no way that you can provide for this child. You don't have the means, you don't have the support.
And what I want to do at this time, because your story is compelling, I'd also like to say, as I've gotten to know you, you're a good soul. I mean, it's so refreshing to be around somebody like you who's been faced with some of the challenges that you have and listen to how God's grace is manifesting itself and playing out in your life. So I tip my hat to you for that. But we do want to talk about the subject of abortion. Mm-hmm. And we want to do it in a loving way. There are a lot of people that are wagging their finger about it. There are a lot of people that are angry about it. But there's some hurtful moments. There's some emotionally touching moments that surround this whole topic. And I would really like for the two of us to talk a little bit about that. And I know you're getting ready to get into that with your story. Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit because we are going to talk some more about abortion.
Right. Well, and yes, and I definitely want to dig into that with you for sure. And I do want everyone to know that it is a tough topic, and not everybody's story is the same, and I get that, but the approach is, and hopefully in my story you hear that it's just been a consistent theme of love, even through the brokenness, even through the hard stuff. And that's, my uncle's telling me this story, as a 27-year-old man, and he's like, I just want you to know what your mom did. But the last time that, he shares that, he said, the last time that I truly, truly thought about you, they were pressuring her to abort, and I don't know how she got away from that facility, but she ran away to save her son. Right. As an 11-year-old mental mind in the body of an 18-year-old woman, you can't tell me that God is not a huge God and has a purpose for every life because of my story. Well,
maybe now I know where that wisdom of an 8-year-old going to the altar came from.
There you go.
From your mother. But anyway,
right,
go. Yeah, go.
So she shows up at his home. He was living in a trailer. He actually traveled with the circus, traveled all over the world, he was an entertainer, but he just happened to be home, right? Mm-hmm. Can you imagine, God's just hand. And she stayed with him for a week. He got in the shower one evening to go to a church event, and she disappeared. He never knew what happened to her from 1982 to 1992. So there was a 10-year gap. So he never knew what happened to the child that she was carrying. So in that midst of that conversation, with tears in my eyes, I was like, can I tell you, I know what happened. And I said, I don't know how she got from your home in Rome, Georgia to Chattanooga, Tennessee, but she wound up in a women's shelter there. They cared for her for a few months, and then she has this pattern, it seems like, to run away. Yeah. Maybe she, she's probably, who knows what kind of abuse that she's experienced in her life, trust issues, and she ran away. And she carried me to this she's 9 months pregnant. She carried me across a mountain over into a little town, if you're from there, called Whitwell. But it's spelled Whitwell, Whitwell, Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And she was living in a cardboard box behind an old grocery store right in the middle of town. And the Picketts, Carl and Peggy, who actually were my neighbors for most of my life,
sure,
they used to feed her. And, they took care of her for a little while. But there was a 16-year-old boy that was skipping school one day, and he came around the back of the store, saw the box move, and he pulls the box back, and it's an 18-year-old, 9-month pregnant woman. So what's he do, 16 years old? He loads her up and takes her home and says, Mom and Dad, look what I found in a box behind the store. Can we keep her?
Wow.
Can you imagine? Not a dog, not a cat, but and it's always comical to me to think about, this is a 16-year-old boy that shows up at his parents' house with a 9-month pregnant girl, like, what did you do? But man,
to look back at it though and see God's hand in all of it.
And that's why I know the details, but it just amazes me every time I think about it. Just the sovereignty of God, and his hand truly is, even in the worst of situations, that he truly is in control. He always will, always has been. But this family, I don't know if they were believers or not, but they took us in, Mama Glenda, my hero is what I call her. And they cared for us for a couple weeks until she gave birth to me. Now, in the research for my book I wrote in 2015, I actually found out that after I was born, Human Services actually was going to take me away from her in the hospital. But this family, will go nameless, they actually snuck us out of the hospital so my mom could keep me.
Right.
And but then within 7 days, she had rolled over on me at night. She had given me water to drink. This 16-year-old boy waited for his parents to leave the house, and he felt like, okay, this baby's not doing well. We don't have the means to provide. So he had a lot of wisdom. God gave him a lot of wisdom at 16. He loaded us up in a car. He drove us about 10 miles to Human Services, and he dropped me off with the same bottle of formula I'd left the hospital with, and basically on death's doorstep. Mm-hmm. And he said, and I say he said because I actually got to meet him.
Yeah.
When I wrote my book, I was researching. I tracked him down. He's 54 years old, and he just wept.
I'm sure.
And he said, I changed your diaper the first time. I never knew if what I did, the decision I made to take you and drop you off that day, was the right one. But he said, I've watched you grow up, because I grew up in the same town he lived in, but he never approached me.
Right.
And he said, I've watched you grow, and I know that I made the right choice. Mm-hmm. And he just, I'm so thankful for him, that he did the right thing.
Right.
And I, being a man of faith, I know that God, I believe and I trust that God prompted him, to do that. And I'm sure it wasn't easy.
Right.
But at that time, my adopted family, this mother that 8 years old that pulled me in close and shared all that, they had gone through a miscarriage. They had 4 children of their own, and they had lost a 22-week-old little boy that they were all, it was a surprise baby. There's a 13-year gap. It wasn't supposed to happen. But God used that brokenness in their life. They started foster parenting because they had this longing for one more little boy, or one more baby, actually.
Right.
And so she's a school teacher. On that day that they dropped me off, she gets a call at the office. And, of course, this is before cell phones. They called her to the office and said, we have a little boy down here that's probably going to die. He probably won't make it. He's really weak, but he needs a place. Would you take him? And they said yes.
Yeah.
They brought in a 7-day-old. They literally squeezed milk into my mouth when I was too weak to suck a bottle. They never put me down. They held me constantly because my legs were so drawn up into my body from malnutrition. They had to literally massage my muscles to get my legs. They said I walked like a bulldog for probably 2 or 3 years till things started straightening out. But I was not only their baby, but even in a community, again, not their color, not their blood, but I was their church's baby. My first Sunday was Easter Sunday, little blue tux that I still have today.
Yeah.
My sisters, because there was a 15-year gap between my 2 sisters. I have 2 brothers that are older, and then I have 2 sisters behind them, and they were still in high school.
Yeah.
So they would have me on their hip, before basketball practice or cheerleading, and I was the community's baby.
Right.
So, and I know I don't know if I told you this or not, or maybe not, but I'm so thankful for that community because, this is 1982.
Sure.
At 6 months old, I found out, my family told me that I was biracial, obviously, in that white home, but the state of Tennessee was going to remove me. But you had a whole community of people that said, this family loves this child. They've nursed him back to health for 6 months, and it's their son.
Yeah.
And they're longing for this. And
Right.
800 petition letters were written on behalf of the Holland family to keep their son, their little boy. And so a 1.5 year legal battle ensued, and they won out. And so at age 2, I officially became Steventhen William Holland instead of Steventhen William Holt.
Right.
So I'm finding all this out at 27 years old.
Sure. Okay, so you're finding all this out. You're telling the story from the side of the folks who were involved in your life, but you've been separated from your mom.
Yep.
And not only have you been separated from your mom, but your mom is the one that gave you your name, Steventhen. So I want to hear a little bit about that, and I want to hear a little bit more about your mom. So what happens with her? What does she know? What does she not know?
Well, people ask me all the time where my name came from. Yeah. And she did. She gave me that name. And what we know, my uncle, who again, and I was standing in front of, and he's telling me all this, I was actually named after him. So Stephen. But then William. So William was my grandfather, her dad. So she wanted me to have both those names. So she named me Stephen, then William in the hospital. So whoever heard that name audibly the way she speaks, they just wrote it exactly the way they heard it.
Right.
Now, I do a lot of church ministry. So I was sharing in a church one time. This little old lady, those prayer warriors on the walker, came up to me and said, "Son, I know, your name's so intriguing to me and I love it." But she said, "I want you to think about something. Everywhere in Scripture where the devil meant something for evil or not for good, but then God."
Right.
And she said, you're set apart for a purpose, and I want you to remember that. So that's pretty powerful too. I'm like, okay, amen, sister. Thank you for that. But yes, so my mom gave me that name. So again, but to go a little further with that, what was so special to me, because I didn't really like the name growing up. I'm the only person in the world, according to Google, with the name Steventhen. There's no, so it's Steventhen.com. It's easy marketing.
Sure.
But I just didn't like it. So I went by Steven. I get older, they call me Steve or Steve-O.
Right.
But part of the story I haven't told you is, so after my uncle, Steve and I, we met each other and we're engaging and talking. And we're crying. And he says, okay. It kind of got awkward for me. I was like, what's coming? And he said, I needed to meet you and look you in the eyes and see you face to face before I told you this, but your mom, my baby sister Glenda's alive. And, I had the, oh, wow, maybe some other choice word. I don't know. It was so shocking.
I'm sure.
I'm like, okay, what do you mean? Where is she?
Yeah.
And he said, she's 5 hours south of where we sit right now in a little town called Jeffersonville, Georgia. And she's in a mental institution.
Right.
And he said, this is what he asked me. Do you want to meet her? And I don't know if you remember what I told you. The Holy Spirit spoke to me in Tampa, Florida, when I started this whole process of looking. He said, it's time. And that's exactly what came out of my mouth without hesitation. It's time. Mm-hmm. God's time. All those moments I told you, growing up, middle school, high school, that longing in my soul that I knew something was off, but his timing wasn't right. He had to take me through a process for my faith to be fortified, and now the vision is becoming clear. Sure. So that process. So I wanted to go right then, but it was like 8:00 at night. My uncle says, we're not going. We got a 5-hour drive. I was like, I don't care. We're going. And he's like, no, we'll go in the morning. So we load up in the car the next morning. We drive 5 hours. My hands are sweating. I'm sure. I'm 27, getting ready to meet.
Does she know you're coming?
No.
Okay.
We didn't tell her anything because, again, she's 46 years old at the time, but she's still only 11 years old in her mind. Yeah. So honestly, we didn't know, how she would react. Sure. I mean, she could, for lack of a better word, freak out. Anxiety attack. She has mental issues, obviously, but her diagnosis, she has epilepsy and a little schizophrenia and all these different things. She's on meds. Yeah. So we just decided to ease in.
Shoals Coffee Co. Coffee Roasters is passionate about two things, people and coffee, because we want to ensure that both reach their full potential. We do our part to improve lives by purchasing coffee beans from women-owned farms in Guatemala and Colombia, along with other sources to bring you the fresh taste and quality product you deserve, while also ensuring that workers are paid fairly and treated well throughout the growing process. 100% of the profit from the sale of Shoals Coffee Co. products is poured directly back into bettering the lives of mothers and babies in communities across the U.S., as well as in the lives of women and children in the countries where we purchase our beans. Our products are available for purchase online at shoalscoffeeco.com and will be delivered right to your door. So buy Shoals Coffee Co. and enjoy your coffee even more, knowing that your purchase is providing for the needs of women and children today, while also impacting lives for generations to come. Shoals Coffee Co. is owned and operated by Shoals Save a Life Incorporated, a pregnancy resource center in North Alabama, and we are proud to be a sponsor of Plain Spoken Grace podcast.
So we went down, and the facility was set up kind of like a nursing home, where you had men on one side, women on the other. So in a common area. Yeah. So I spent 2 hours interacting with my birth mom, and she not even know who I was, but I knew who she was. So my uncle says, okay, what we're going to do is I'll do a magic show, like do a show for the residents. So we brought everybody into the big room, and he does this show. And the plan was to go back to a private room, to her room, and do an introduction. But the Holy Spirit, the Lord, just took over. And the funny thing is, me being a worship leader and a songwriter, she actually wrote songs all the time. They made no sense to anybody but her. Right. But she sang a song after he finishes. And I had been on the camera, rolling the camera the whole time. And the Spirit of the Lord just said, go sing Amazing Grace. So the camera's on, and I go up, and my uncle's on one side of her. She's in the middle. and I start singing Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved. And I couldn't get another word out.
Right.
Because not only spiritually am I saved, but this woman that I'm looking her in the eyes, she saved my life.
Right.
And I get to, by the grace of God, I didn't need to have that moment to know that God was real and powerful, but for him to give me that gift. Because, see, my thought was, I don't care how she reacts. I do, but
sure.
What I need for me is to look this woman in the eyes that's my hero and tell her that I love her.
Sure.
And thank you for choosing life for me. Because if she wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have a beautiful wife of 14 years. I wouldn't have 3 beautiful daughters.
Right.
I wouldn't have this story to share.
No.
And so it was such a powerful moment. And so I captured that all on film. And so I have a 4-minute video that now that the world gets to see.
We're going to link it. We're going to link it. Yeah, we're going to link it.
I held on to it like close to my chest for a few years, but I felt like, you know what, the world needs to see it and hear it. And so it's on YouTube, so people can go watch it.
Right.
Be blessed by it.
Right. Mm-hmm. That story has had an impact on your ministry.
Absolutely.
And has had an impact on your ministry and conversation about abortion. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I want people to hear more about that.
Yeah. Well, I actually am represented by a speaking agency in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a national pro-life speaker and advocate. But again, we mentioned earlier, in a loving way. I think there's approach to where I have a ministry called Broken, Not Dead. And my life, I'm broken today, but I'm not dead. I'm still here. And again, I have a purpose, but I think that every person that is alive and breathing and still has a heartbeat, I believe that to be true for all of us.
Right.
But for me in the pro-life world is my story. A lot of people would say, you look at statistics, a mentally challenged mother.
Right.
Mental facility, state-owned, no family, no money. There's no way that she has a right, to bring a child into the world, society would say.
Interesting choice of words. Yeah.
Right? But even, the mental handicap alone, well, is she really in her right state of mind, to make an educated decision? And all I can speak to as far as is my story. Right. I'm a child that's a product of rape.
Right.
Not by one man, but by 5. Mentally challenged mother who, only 11 years old. She doesn't know what she's doing. But you cannot tell me that she knew as an 11-year-old child in her mind that the life that she was carrying was worth living.
Yeah.
And that the right thing to do was to choose life for that child. Even despite, impossible odds. And you can imagine she had no support. She didn't have one day of prenatal care. Not one day.
No.
And she really didn't have any voices in her corner saying that this is the right thing to do. She just knew internally what God gave her, that a motherly instinct.
Well, and that's one of the challenges with the conversation about abortion is because there is so much, there's so much chatter, there's so much information, there's so much input. Usually somebody is in a situation, oftentimes, sadly, where they're afraid. They're just afraid and they don't know what to do. And then all of a sudden, here comes the conversation about, options and what you could do, what you should do, statistically, what's right to do. And it's confusing. Mm-hmm. It's confusing. So my heart goes out to anybody who's in that situation. Absolutely. And I want people to hear us say that we're not having this conversation trying to pass judgment on the struggles or the hurt that somebody's going through when they face this, because oftentimes it's a surprise. Right. Oftentimes it's inconvenient. Oftentimes it's things that maybe the world would say ought to be dealt with in a different way than what you personally experienced. Mm-hmm. And so how do we have that conversation with people who are struggling?
Yeah. Well, I think it's my approach is always, whether I'm talking, I spoke actually to students, middle school, high school students for a lot of years. I was a youth pastor for 12 years, and I actually spoke with it would be a sexual risk avoidance group. So I was speaking in schools, but whether it's students or adults, nobody can make a decision for anybody else. So I'll take the school approach. I go in and let's say talk about drugs, right? Well, I can give you facts. I can give you all the things in the world, and I say, but you have to take that information and make the best decision possible for you. So my approach is I have an opinion,
right?
But if I sit here and share my opinion with you and push that on you,
right,
I don't think that's what's best. Now, what I can do, I think I've been given a life. I have the story that brings a perspective, right, to the choices and decisions that were made that I'm even here today.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't here today and those choices and decisions wouldn't have been made, right, or obviously I wouldn't be here.
Sure.
So I think that education empowers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we need to be talking about it. Obviously being men of faith, I think the church, I'm going to be bold, is drop the ball, quite a bit on this issue. When you have 60% of, some statistics out there say 60% of abortions are had by evangelicals, wow. My heart breaks.
Sure.
Because why is that?
Right.
And I'm just saying, I don't think we talk about it enough, like have real open heart-to-heart conversations. Again, not judgment, but just talk through the facts, because a lot of times with abortion, we think about the physical only, but you don't realize the emotional part of it. Very rarely do you have people that have gone through making that decision where it's a happy thing. Right. It comes with a lot of weight, a lot of baggage, but so does parenting and so does adoption. But abortion is the only option, the decision made out of those three, where you can't take it back.
Mm. Interesting.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure.
So it's a final decision.
Sure.
And I think we need to, put more emphasis on educating and talking through, and what does that really look like?
Right. One of the things that we're trying to do in these conversations that we're having with some of the folks on Plain Spoken Grace is each one of us has a story. Each one of us has a different story. We've all been impacted and challenged and broken, as you've said with your ministry, in different ways. And sometimes it may be something. It may be. With drugs, or it may be some sort of other addictions in life, or some other the deeds of the flesh that pull us away, and we can, of course, identify and talk about those. But the one thing that I'm trying to compel in these conversations is that each one of us has a story. Your story is different than my story. My story is different than Bishop Jackson's story, who was one of our guests recently, or General Boykins, or my good friend George Wigginton. But each of us has had challenges. Each one of us has had our faith in some way sharpened by this. And it's important that we tell our story without being judgmental about other people's situations. And maybe we can just be some light in darkness.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and I think, the whole reason I could have called this ministry that God's called me to my name, Steventhen Holland Ministries.
Right.
But the reason that I feel like God is, I say ministry, but I had somebody challenge me the other day that this is a movement, that broken, not dead. Mm-hmm. This is a message the world needs to hear. Obviously, the foundation is the gospel, is the truth that Jesus died for you, and so much so that He created you for a purpose, and rose again, and the gospel is the truth. But saying it in a way to where it's almost helping people come to a realization or a revelation that, wait, I am broken, but I'm not dead yet. Mm. That there, even though it's been tough and the struggle's been real, there's still purpose for me, and that's seeing that myself through God's lenses. I think that's kind of my mission. That's my battle cry, that, I'm a walking testimony, hopefully, of the goodness and the love of God and the purpose. But I'm not the only one with that story, and I realize that. Right. So it's creating a platform to where, let's share our stories. Like a lot, I'm so thankful for Plain Spoken Grace, that I have the opportunity to get these stories of hope, to get these stories of just real talk about overcoming things. And I think, I know it's not a think thing. I've heard so many testimonies from people that just, whether it be sharing my testimony or just being able to pierce their own brokenness. I love, have you ever heard of kintsugi, Chip? I think if I say that right, it's the Japanese art form of taking broken pottery and mending it back together.
Yes.
Now, that's not my thing, but I love the process because I think
it makes each piece unique.
It does.
And each piece has its own story because of the way it's broken.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But most of us would take that broken pot or plate and throw it away.
Yeah.
But that philosophy is you take every single broken piece and you mend it back together. And in that process, they use a lacquer and they lace it with precious metals. So a lot of times it's silver, platinum, or gold. So 3 things I think about with that is, okay, yes, you're broken, but when it's mended, could it still be used?
Right.
I'm going to say you're still usable, even with your brokenness.
Sure.
And the scars and the brokenness is what makes you beautiful. And it not only that, but it actually is worth more. You're worth more than you were in your original state.
Right.
And the part that I probably love the most is because of that and the process, it actually reflects the light because of the precious metals in there. So when I think about, I know I'm using an image here, but when you think about, yes, I'm broken today. Yes, I have scars, but I'm worth more than I ever was in my original state because I've gone through the process. And my faith is stronger now because I've gone through it and made it through. And now I get to reflect the light. Right. I mean, Lord, use me. Glorify you through my weakness and through my brokenness. And if it can be a help to somebody else, we've got to do it.
Yes.
There's power in our testimonies.
Yes.
So,
so I want to share a little bit of a story about myself, and then then I want to talk a little bit more about how we were knit in the womb, that God knew us before we even knew Him, and I'll have you read those verses if we could when we get to that point. My wife and I, we have 3 sons. One of them is actually behind one of the cameras right now as a part of all this. So that's an awful lot of fun for a dad. And we're pregnant, 3rd pregnancy, and we're at church, Sunday school class. Sharon tells a friend who happens to be a nurse that something doesn't feel right. And we've got a scheduled C-section the next morning at the hospital. And the lady there says, well, go to the hospital and just have them check you to make sure that everything's okay so you can get a good night's sleep before you go in and have the delivery in the morning. So we leave church and head over to the hospital and find out that we have lost a full-term child. And my wife sadly then gets escorted out for a C-section, but it's an emergency C-section to deliver a dead child. The doctors, in their wisdom, I didn't understand it at the time, said, we would recommend that you hold your daughter, this little girl. We didn't know prior to there was going to be a boy or a girl. And I thought, well, I don't know about this. I just don't know about it. Anyway, in the hospital room, they bring the little girl. I hold her. She's beautiful, full term. Nothing. There's not a flaw that you can see on anything about her. And I think to myself, not necessarily in that moment, but in moments after that, how in the world could somebody take a young baby, full term, and terminate its life like that? I don't understand it. There's such love, there's such beauty in that creation. There's sadness in that story. The other side of it, though, that I've told before is that was going to be it. That was going to be our 3rd child. We weren't going to have any more. The doctors also said this is not the time to make that decision about Sharon was going to have her tubes tied. There's always time for that. But 2 years later, Luke is born, our 3rd son. And I couldn't imagine what it would be like if in this world without Luke or Sam or Charlie, his brothers. but that piece of that love, that hurt, that emotion, the beauty of God's creation as you're holding it, I'm just baffled by how somebody can destroy that. And I don't say that where I'm wagging my finger at somebody. I say that with a heart, because I care and because I love, and I care and I love the decisions that some of these people may be faced with. And so I know you can speak to that. What do you tell that person who's in that moment and there's a part of them that says, I don't want to do this, but I'm being told to do this. Obviously, your story with your mother puts you right into that situation.
Right. Well, can I read that passage of Scripture?
Let's do it. Yeah, please. Thank you for...
Let me read this, and then I think I can speak on that a little bit. So in Psalm 139, and I'm going to read verses 13 through 16 if I can get through it. Mm-hmm. You formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me. When I was yet there was none of them. When I read that, it's just so overwhelming to me, reminded of just the goodness of God. And I think, obviously, people aren't going to know that unless they pick that book up or they have somebody. So I think at the foundation of it all is the gospel. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we say that, but as men of faith, that's where the true source of hope comes from.
Right.
So I'm so thankful for example, pregnancy centers out there that are faith-based, that are, giving that faith-based option. But to say that, okay, that life that is in the womb, according to Scripture, has purpose, no matter the circumstance. Mm-hmm. Again, with my story, you said I can relate to that. My mother was raped by 5 men, mentally handicapped, no income, no home, but God yet still had a purpose, even through the midst of all the brokenness and the circumstances. The life was still worth it. And I was actually asked to speak a few weekends ago for a Sanctity of Life, a sermon that I did at a church, and I was researching, just to share something that's not just me, my story. Yeah. And I came across just a thought of the Holocaust. And the question was, posed like, how could the Holocaust even happen? So I'll even say that, how could, you asked the question, how could somebody take the life of a full-term baby, much less any form? Because I believe, again, this is my opinion, that life begins at conception. I mean, Correct. You have a heartbeat that can be detected in 18 days. You have brain waves that can be seen in an ultrasound, which I'm so thankful for those. Mm-hmm. Within 20 to 22 days, you have brain waves. Yeah. So again, but here's what it was said. There was a German man that they had a church that sat near the train tracks, and the train would go by during service all the time, like clockwork, and it would have a train car full of Jewish people, and they'd be crying out. And to drown out the sounds of the cries, they would just start singing hymns, and they sing louder and louder and louder to drown it out. And I think where we are today, I think sometimes we might find ourselves maybe trying to sing a little louder. But how could the Holocaust ever have happened? And it was said there was an attitude. When we get to the point where we have an attitude that life is not worth being lived, that's we start getting into maybe some hot water, Yeah. And I think there's an attitude, maybe adjustment would be a good word, to where, is that life worth being lived? And a lot of people would say my mom's life wouldn't even really... Correct.
But I mean, the beauty of your story is that in so many ways, a lot of folks would have said, no, 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 no. And look at the beauty of your life worth living.
Right. And that's the thing. Who are we to judge, whether that life is worth living or not? And that's the question, because even in the abortion argument, yes, whether pro-choice, pro-life, there's really not a debate anymore on whether that's actually viable life or not. I mean, it's kind of been, okay, there's life, but it's really a choice thing.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying, where, if you have an attitude that life is not worth being lived, then, I think that's where we've got to start. And it goes back again to, let's have those discussions. Let's have real talks, and not again, wagging the finger talks, but okay, could your thinking or could your attitude, possibly be wrong? Or have you thought about this option? We can still disagree, but we can have those.
Well, and the thing, and that's it. We're trying to have this conversation where we're doing it in a loving way. It's not that we're trying to put it on you. It's not that we're trying to judge you. It's not that we're trying to belittle you. It's not trying to. We're surely not trying to put ourselves in a position where we're saying, well, we're better than you because we have this. That's a whole part of the whole story of being a Christian anyway. It's nothing we earned. It's nothing we deserved. Right. It's because God loved us first. It's because of His grace. It's because of not only the birth, but the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus that we're having this conversation and we're telling this story. So we're trying to just shed light in the conversation of, well, at least think about these things. Mm-hmm. Think about these things. Right. You were involved with it. So this part's a little bit fun. One of our sponsors, Shoals Coffee Co. Mm-hmm. Beth is a good friend of both of ours. You worked with her for a couple of years. You actually witnessed firsthand what's happening in this little coffee company and the lives that it's impacting. Mm-hmm. Share some of that, because I think there's some beauty in some of those stories, and there's some sadness as well, but there's some beauty in some of those stories.
Well, I think, honestly, so I started, like, Broken Not Dead Ministries became a nonprofit. Really, a lot of the seeds that were planted, I've been in ministry in the church world, and I always talk about, like, tunnel vision. When you're pastoring or ministering, it's church, 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 mm-hmm. And sometimes it's not that you don't care about the world, but your career is focused inward a lot. So when I started working for Shoals Save a Life and with Beth, my job was to go speak in the schools, and I saw 12,000 students, 7th grade through seniors. And the curriculum that we were doing, we wound up actually writing our own, because the frustration is there's so much information, right, which is important.
Sure.
The education, again, empowers, but the heart was missing. Mm. And what I started noticing was that no matter whether it's a 7th grader or a senior, anything in between, they're struggling with worth and value. Like, so if a child, but not only a child, but any person, if you don't realize that you have worth and value, you don't care about the statistics, When I have a 7th grade girl coming up to me and saying that, you're talking about 7 billion plus people in the world and all of us are unique. And she's like, you're lying. My parents have told me that I'm trash and worthless. Mm. You have your parents telling you that you're trash and worthless. But the truth is, now I was in a public school setting and I couldn't mention Christ. But the theme was, no, actually, your parents love them, respect them, but they don't have a right to define your worth and your value.
Yeah.
That's a decision you have to make on your own. So now that you know that, there's not any out of all those 7 billion plus people, even identical twins are not the same. Mm-hmm. You are unique and you're special and you are worth something. And she just breaks my heart as a father of 3 girls. Then a senior girl, the same conversation, but we're talking about what consent means. Like going on to the college campus and having to deal with the hookup culture and
Sure.
all that comes with it. And, man, you talk about breaking a dad's heart. This 18-year-old girl, she's an adult, a senior in high school. She waits for everybody to leave the room, and the teacher's in there with me, and she breaks down and she says, you're talking about all that worth and value stuff. I don't have any. And I said, why not? And she said, I've been molested my whole life by a family member. My parents knew about it. They never did anything because they didn't want people to know. And she said, by middle school, I cut off all my hair. I didn't want anybody to think that I was beautiful. Yeah. I didn't want them to look at me, touch me. She's like, I don't have any more worth and value. And at that point, Chip, I didn't care if I lost my job or not, to be honest with you.
Good for you.
I said, God loves you. I said, I know that you've been broken and I know you have pain, but you're still here. Mm-hmm. She said, I tried to kill myself 5 times already. Mm-hmm. And I said, but you're still here. And I said, I can't relate to your pain, but I've been broken, and you're not dead yet.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you want to do with your life? And she said, I don't want anybody else to hurt like I've hurt, and if they have, I want to help them. And I said, you found your purpose.
You did.
And I said, God, I don't know why it came out, but I said, God gives his toughest battles to his toughest warriors. And I said, and I pray that one day your dream will come true, and you'll be able to, because now this is country for you, but you can't reach the broke if you ain't been broke.
Right. Right. No, right.
So she's going to be able to relate.
Your experience of what you've been through,
Absolutely.
You can have a conversation with somebody who has been through some of what you've been through.
Absolutely.
The story I just shared, I can discuss with somebody who's either been through it or going through it. It's amazing how I've opened up a little bit about our loss of our daughter and the number of folks that I'm hearing from who said, I didn't know that. And then they start sharing their experience of what they went through and their challenges and so forth. But that is a part of the way that we should administer.
Absolutely. And
in love.
Absolutely. In love. I know, you asked me about what it was like to work for them, but I think the stories, just the impact and what happened, because what I'm saying is I realized even more so, I think there was a foundation that was laid by doing that, because I was comfortable at the church I was working at in Tampa, Florida. I was leading 5 worship services a week. I owned a house. I had 2 cars, and here I go work, I step away from that, write a book. And then the book, sharing my story, opens up this door to work for a pregnancy center. I never thought I'd be working there, never sharing in the schools. But I was a youth pastor, so I'd kind of been groomed for that,
Sure.
But one last story, Please. Share there.
Yeah.
Man, you talk about how God, is in control, working in all things, and you don't realize, and that's one thing I love about as I'm even reflecting on myself and being in tune with, okay, God, use me today, every day, use me. One of the last things that happened before I came off staff there, we had a 12-year-old, she was 12 years old, Hispanic girl. She had actually been raped by her uncle and got pregnant. Her family didn't want her to have the baby, obviously. She came into the pregnancy center and, actually, let me backtrack. I was asked to lead worship for a summer camp, and she was pregnant at that camp.
Okay.
And I didn't know her.
Okay.
It wasn't planned, but something happened during the week, and they asked me if I would share my testimony. And I got to share my story with her in the room, unknowing that she was carrying a child and what had happened to her. 2 weeks after that camp, she shows up at the pregnancy center. This is during the summer. And normally I would be out speaking in the schools during the week, but I was sitting there at the table, and she came in with her family, and they were going to force her to have an abortion, but somebody had talked them into coming to the pregnancy center just to, a last ditch resort, and she saw me sitting at the table, and she remembered me sharing the story.
Sure.
And her family, she went against the wishes of her family to save her baby.
Yeah.
And she chose life.
Right.
Okay, that's great, but it gets better. I was leading worship, some time after, a few months after, and at a church, and this family brings this baby and places it in my arms. And guess what?
The baby.
It was the baby. She chose an adoption plan, and that baby was placed in my arms and said, we just want to thank you for being obedient. Then I go to another church to minister at this church for a youth event. And this little Hispanic girl that I recognized came up to me after the service and was crying. And there was a family in that church that had adopted her because she got removed from the family because of the situation.
Wow.
And she was crying, and she said, I know that you can maybe relate to this, maybe not. But she said, how will I know that my son knows that I love him? I'm struggling with that. And I was able to tell her, because of my experience and my brokenness, I said, I don't know if your son will ever get this opportunity, but I want to tell you something. You're one of my heroes.
Yeah.
It takes a strong person at any age to be able to give the gift that you gave that little boy was life.
Right.
And even harder to give it away.
Right.
For somebody else to take care of, but you loved him enough to do that.
Right.
And when I was 27, I had the opportunity to look my hero in the face and tell her I love her. And I hope and pray if God will give you that gift, that you'll get that one day. But what you did was heroic. And I said, you're one of the strongest women on the planet Earth. And I just want you to know that. And I'm thankful for that. It was hard. I mean, her little heart, I know it was hard on her. She was 13 at the time. But, man, just to look, I mean, I know it's like connecting the dots that, God, you're in this.
Right.
And we have to be open. And I know I keep going back to that. You know, you probably caught a theme in my life, but there's so much power in our brokenness. But so many of us don't realize that it's there because maybe we get caught up in it, in the process. But you have to go through the process.
Correct.
For the faith to be fortified. And once you get through that, then the vision starts to become clear. And that's where I am.
Correct.
You know, I'm just seeing God work, and it's so cool to be in tune with it.
There's so much that we could talk about, and we really could go on for hours. But your ministry, there are other things that you're doing with your music, with your book, speaking engagements. Right. Elaborate on that for folks who want to find you, who want to engage with you, who want to have you come speak to their groups.
Right. Well, first of all, you know, the best place to go would be brokennotdead.com for the ministry as a whole, or Steventhen.com. Remember, I told you it's easy marketing. I'm the only Steventhen in the world. So those are the two websites, you know, which will...
Steventhen, Steventhen.
Yep.
Stephen
Then, right. Stephen with a V, then.com.
Yes.
And then, again, brokennotdead.com. So, again, I'm a speaker, inspirational, motivational speaker, and national pro-life speaker. So those are, the speaking side. But also, we didn't talk a lot about it because of time, but I'm a musician.
Yeah.
Singer, songwriter. I've got 18 songs that I've written. I call them my songs of hope. There's that general theme in everything I write.
How could you be from the Muscle Shoals area and not have a little music in your blood,
absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. Which a beautiful thing, kind of a bucket list. I got to record my last 3 songs at Fame Recording Studios, which is iconic. You know, Aretha Franklin and Percy Sledge and some of that funk soul. So that was a lot of fun. But I've got 18 songs, and they're all digital music platforms. So iTunes, Spotify, any of those places. Amazon Music. So you can get that. And then I think probably one of the beautiful treasures that I have that I always want people to know is the video I talked about with my mom. I have a YouTube channel that you can, all my music's on YouTube as well, but the video of me meeting my mom is on there.
Priceless.
It is. It's only 4 minutes of your time, and have tissues. People always, you should have told me to have tissues.
Yeah.
And then I also have a video of my adopted mom meeting my birth mom.
Wow.
So that's kind of a little of a mini doc that I had filmed. So those 2 are on there as well.
Absolutely beautiful. Don't forget to talk about your book.
Well, and my book is on Amazon.
Okay.
It's called The Journey, Brokenness to Wholeness. So it shares, which will give a lot more detail that we weren't able to cover, of just the whole meeting my mom, my adopted family, and then kind of where I am today. And I'll just go ahead and say it here. There's probably another one coming because I need to add more to the story, especially with her death. I want to honor that. So
absolutely. Well, proud of you.
Thank you, Chip.
Thankful for your time, the beauty of your ministry. Please keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Will do.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.